You need to leave. My father's voice cut through the ambient jazz of the Founders Lounge like shattered glass. I stopped, my hand hovering near the velvet rope. He stood there, flanked by my sister Arabella, both of them dressed in immaculate evening wear that probably cost more than my first car. But it wasn't their clothes that caught my attention. It was the sheer, unadulterated panic in their eyes. They weren't just annoyed to see me. They were terrified. Terrified that my presence, my dusty boots, my wind-blown hair, my very existence, would somehow taint the perfect image they had spent decades curating. Arabella actually stepped forward to physically block my path. Her manicured hand raised like a traffic cop. You cannot go in there looking like that, she hissed. This is the Harvest Gala, Clara. The Founders Lounge is for elite members only. She gestured vaguely at my outfit, her face twisting in disgust. Not for whatever this is. Go home before you humiliate us. Drop a comment and let me know. Have you ever been the black sheep of the family who was actually doing better than the golden child? I want to hear your story. I didn't leave. I didn't argue. I simply stepped back into the shadows of the trellis, watching them through the leaves. To them I was Clara the drifter, the daughter who disappeared for months at a time to find herself in third-world countries. The failure who couldn't hold down a real job and preferred playing in the dirt to attending board meetings. They saw my worn boots and assumed poverty. They saw my calloused hands and assumed manual labor. What they didn't see, what they had never bothered to look for, was the truth. I wasn't drifting. I was working. For the past 6 years, I had built a reputation as a hospitality developer specializing in distressed luxury properties. I didn't just visit Bali. I spent 8 months there rehabilitating a failing resort into an ecotourism goldmine. I didn't just wander through Dubai. I oversaw the restructuring of a hotel chain that was hemorrhaging millions. My work wasn't glamorous. It was gritty. It involved mud, sweat, negotiations with contractors, and 18-hour days staring at spreadsheets. But it was mine. And it was lucrative. Standing there in the shadows, watching my father smooth his tuxedo jacket and smile charmingly at a passing waiter, I felt a familiar ache. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was something colder. A clinical observation of a pattern I had lived with my entire life. They didn't hate me because I was a failure. They needed me to be a failure. It was the only way their world made sense. If I was the mess, then they were the success. If I was the chaos, they were the order. It was a trap of normalized cruelty they had built around themselves. A psychological fortress where their superiority depended entirely on my inferiority. They couldn't afford to see me as competent because if I was competent, then their dismissal of me wasn't justified. It was just mean. And they couldn't be mean. They were the Sterlings. They were perfect. I watched Arabella check her reflection in the glass of the lounge door, adjusting her hair for the 5th time. She was beautiful, certainly. Polished to a high shine. But she had never built anything in her life. Her entire existence was a performance funded by our parents, a series of curated moments designed for consumption. And my father, Douglas Sterling, the man who valued a board seat more than his own integrity. He was laughing now, clapping a man on the back, playing the role of the benevolent patriarch. But I knew the truth about the family finances. I knew things they didn't know I knew. I pulled my phone from my pocket and checked my emails. A message from my assistant confirmed the wire transfer had cleared. $28.5 million. The purchase price for the Sterling Vineyard and Polo Club. I wasn't just a guest they were trying to exclude. I was the owner. And they were about to find out exactly what that meant. My reverie was broken by the sound of my father's voice rising again. He had spotted me. I hadn't left the property fast enough for his liking. He marched over. His face flushed with a dangerous mix of embarrassment and rage. I told you to leave, he snarled, abandoning the charming facade. Are you deaf as well as useless? Look at you. You're a stain on this evening. Trespassing on private property like some vagrant. Arabella was right behind him, phone in hand, probably ready to record my humiliation for her private story. Seriously, Clara, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. Do you have no shame? You don't even have a wristband. You're literally crashing a gala you can't afford. Security! Douglas shouted, waving his arm. We have a trespasser. Remove this woman immediately. The crowd turned. The music seemed to stop. Hundreds of eyes fixed on us. On the distinguished Douglas Sterling screaming at a woman in work boots. On Arabella sneering in her designer gown. And on me, standing quietly, holding a tablet I had pulled from my bag. Security arrived within seconds. 3 large men in suits, followed by a woman I recognized instantly. Lena, the general manager. She looked stressed, her eyes scanning the scene until they landed on me. Then her expression changed. It wasn't recognition. It was deference. Douglas didn't notice. He was too busy pointing a shaking finger at my chest. "Get her out of here," he demanded. "She's disturbing the guests. She's insulting the membership with those muddy boots." Elena stepped between us. She didn't look at my father. She turned her back to him, facing me directly. "Miss Sterling," she said, her voice clear and respectful. "I apologize for the disturbance. How do you want to handle this?" My father froze. His mouth opened but no sound came out. Arabella laughed, a nervous, confused sound. "What are you doing?" she asked Elena. "That's my sister. She's nobody. She doesn't even have a membership." I tapped the screen of my tablet and held it up. The acquisition documents were clear. The digital signatures were verified. The timestamp was 8 months ago. "I didn't buy a membership," I said, my voice projecting just enough to be heard by the silent crowd. "I bought the debt. I bought the land. And I bought the brand. I own this vineyard." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of a worldview shattering. My mother, Catherine, had joined them now, looking from the tablet to me with wide, frightened eyes. "That's impossible," she whispered. You don't have any money. You're Clara." I swiped to the next page. The bank statements, the renovation budget. $15 million invested in upgrades over the last 8 months. The new irrigation system. That was me. The renovated stables. Me. The very lounge you're standing in front of. I signed the work order. I bought this place under a holding company because I didn't want this. I gestured to them, to the scene they had created. I didn't want the drama. I just wanted to save the property because, unlike you, I actually care about the land, not just the status it gives me. But Douglas stammered, his face pale. "We're legacy members. We have platinum status. You can't just. We made this place." "You didn't make anything, Dad," I said. "You consumed it. And regarding your status," I swiped again. The accounts receivable file appeared on the screen. I turned it so they could see. So everyone could see. Platinum membership at the Sterling Vineyard is $85,000 a year. I pointed to a line item highlighted in red. Douglas Sterling. Outstanding balance. $68,000. Last payment. 8 months ago. The gasps from the crowd were audible. My father looked like he might faint. Arabella stared at the screen, reading the numbers, her reality crumbling. "You haven't paid your dues in nearly a year," I continued, my voice cold and precise. "Your cards were declined 8 months ago. The previous ownership group was going to ban you. They were going to escort you out publicly and revoke your membership permanently. I stopped them. I set up a shadow account. Guest of the owner. I've been paying your dues. I've been covering your bar tabs. I've been authorizing your access every single time you walked through those gates. You weren't VIPs. You were my charity cases." This was the moment. The illusion of power from an empty wallet. They stood tall because they believed their status was inherent, something in their blood, something owed to them. But it was rented. It was bought. And the moment the financial veil was lifted, the moment the money was revealed to be an illusion, their posture collapsed. They weren't powerful. They were broke. And they were standing on my charity. "It's a lie," Arabella screeched, her voice shrill and desperate. "She's lying. Daddy, tell them she's lying." But Douglas couldn't speak. He knew. Deep down, he knew the money had run out. He knew the cards had been declining. He just hadn't known why the gates kept opening. Now he did. "Look at me," I said. "Not at my clothes. Me. You wanted me gone. You wanted to protect your image. Well, here we are. So I'm giving you a choice. You can stay. You can walk into that lounge and take your photos. But you have to clear the balance. Right now. $68,000. Plus the fee for tonight's event. Transfer it. Write a check. I don't care. But pay your bill." My father looked at his shoes. My mother gripped his arm, her knuckles white. Arabella looked around the crowd, realizing with horror that the people she tried to impress were now looking at her with pity. They didn't have it. They didn't have $68,000. They probably didn't have 6,000. Their entire life was a house of cards, and I had just pulled the bottom one out. This isn't fair, Arabella yelled, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. You're doing this on purpose. You're jealous. You've always been jealous. I nodded to security. The same men my father had summoned. Please escort these non-members off the property, I said calmly. They are disturbing the guests. The guards moved instantly. Professional. Passive. They stepped between me and my family. Mr. Sterling, please come with us. My father didn't fight. He looked broken. He let them guide him away, past the velvet rope, past the lounge, through the crowd of whispering elites in their tuxedos and gowns. My mother followed, head down. Arabella was still sobbing, dragged along in their wake. I watched them go. I watched them walk the long path to the parking lot, their silhouettes shrinking against the lights of the gala. I turned back to Elena. Is the reserve vintage open? Yes. She smiled, a genuine warm smile. I have a bottle waiting for you in the lounge, Miss Sterling. I walked into the founder's lounge. My lounge. I sat in a leather armchair by the window, looking out over the vineyards. The glass Elena handed me was cool and heavy in my hand. The wine was dark, rich, complex. I pulled my phone from my pocket one last time. I opened the administrative app for the club. I found the profile for Douglas Sterling. I found the override code I had created 8 months ago. The shadow sponsor tag. I hit delete. Confirm deletion. The screen asked. I watched the loading icon spin for a second, then vanish. Profile deactivated. It was done. I hadn't lost a family. I realized that now. I had shed a liability. I had cut loose an anchor that had been dragging me down for years, demanding I drown so they could float. I took a sip of the wine. Tasted like freedom. Tasted like soil and sun and hard work. Tasted like the truth. I looked out at the vines, row upon row of them, stretching into the darkness. I had saved them. I had saved this place. And finally, for the first time in my life, I had saved myself.